Hello, fellow skeptics. Lester the Skeptic Tank here. Just gonna touch upon something that was announced from my circle of friends, particularly within my parish. I'll connect the dots, hopefully sooner than later, but I'm going to pull up my web browser and I'm going to go to this website because there was an announcement made. And you're going to see what affiliation or church affiliation I'm with, but you're seeing it right there. And again, I'll connect the dots sooner than later. That's my hope. And I'm going to just hit on this just in case you guys are curious. I'm going to try to present the text here to kind of give you an idea. So it gives a description. You're probably seeing it right there. And so basically that defines the body which determined this announcement that was made. And we're going to go into the read more. And it looks like this was maybe just announced. Looks like based on the dating yesterday. And there's a copy of the plea. And here's a copy of the PDF if you guys are ever curious. Don't know if you guys would be. But, so this has been made by a self-governing body. In this particular case, by churchy affiliation. You're going to look at that. You're going to look at the logo at the top left corner. What is it about this particular jurisdiction or governing body? So you're looking at some of the ways the governance is set up. So my understanding is the Holy Synod is the one that makes a grand proclamation. The All-American Council, in my experience, is I may not have been in attendance, but I know people who have been. So these are things that we as a body of believers, for lack of a better term, where we come together from all over America and we convene in a designated location and we sort things out. This is where the connecting the dots come into play, which I'll explain shortly. Connecting the dots, as it were. This process of declaring this lady, Matushka Olga, if you wanna know more, I can provide the resources when I upload the complete video. But what the dot I'm going to connect with is I've made a joke, and I don't know how long I've made it. And I usually say the word half joke because, yeah, it's a little humorous. But at the same time, it's a little serious. Particularly when it comes to making certain proclamations. And another joke I make is who died and made George Lucas Pope? Because as we all have seen, whether we want to clamor for George's repurchasing or reclamation or repossession of Star Wars, he himself has made certain statements. And I think the buzz heard around the interwebs is his statement on midichlorians and the Force. And there is just enough out there, and especially when we talk about the greater community of fans, and I'm talking about fans of varying degrees, whether we're talking normies, whether we're talking diehards who have read every bit of material out there. However small, however large, we're all grafted onto this greater body of work, or dare I call tradition, of Star Wars. Now, in terms of Matushka Olga, these petitions have been going on for, I think, more than a decade. I don't know the exact number, but I know that people have been petitioning for her official recognition by the greater church at large, or at least within the jurisdiction to which I belong, the Orthodox Church in America, or OCA, that we as a self-governing body have set up criteria on whether they'll make that official proclamation. And they gather these petitions from all sorts of people who may have known her and witness to her way of life meeting the criteria set forth by the governing body. In this case, as I pointed out, the Holy Synod of Bishops, the Holy Synod of the OCA. Now, when it comes to properties, and yes, there will be things that, for something like pop culture, of course we got to adapt it around that, because pop culture is pop culture is pop culture. But there needs to be a litmus test. There needs to be a set of criteria. Now, I would love for a possible setup where I joke about having an ecumenical council surrounding Star Wars, what's canon, what's not. And as I've read the Twitterverse or Twixverse, whatever you want to call it, the buzz surrounding the implementation of Miles Morales, I think that's his name, as far as like Spider-Man, it seems to be a monopolization. Whoever owns the rights, they make the call. That's all well and good, and I guess that's their legal right because they own the property. But at the same time, that may be the case, but you've had people throughout decades since the inception of Spider-Man, in such a case, that people have been invested in the lore. They've tapped into that, however small, however large, whether it's simply watching the TV series, the cartoons, Netflix shows. I think there was a series of Netflix shows, and people come in contact with that property in that way. Okay? And if it takes the church this long, I don't know how we would even do that, because it does involve setting the criteria. Who's the arbiter of that? Who's the first among equals? And that will be the humorously entertaining venture if they were to take such a venture. Determining who would be the one whose voice they cannot ignore. The wise one. To rein things in a little bit. Because as we see that with monopolies or monopolization of, in this case, of prop culture or in certain intellectual properties, again, going back to Star Wars, you saw what happened. It's something where it's whoever that next owner, if there will happen to be one, if that ever was taken up by someone else. Based on the buzz I'm hearing, that's not likely to happen. But hypothetically speaking, if there were to be a handoff of the property from one owner to the other, who's to say the next owner will continually run amok of the definition. And this is where the community, and it's the thing that the churches, even including the Roman Catholic Church, yes, I'll throw them in there because there is buzz within that community, especially here in the States, who don't run amok with persecutions for the most part, where they're kind of living a life of luxury and that they don't have to worry too much about these things. And now there's a weirdness going on within that world that they're trying to figure out a degree of conciliarity, gathering in council. They're trying to slowly undo those cobwebs, but they can't let go of that monarchical attitude. So on paper, everything sounds good in their world, but then it's almost like they want to have their cake and eat it too. But before all that, before the Pope became, in the minds of many, I would say it's not, I mean, historically speaking, in a very simplistic attitude or manner, the Bishop of Rome set himself up, whether he intended to or not. And there have been popes in history who have tried to inject such. But again, in simplistic manner, the Bishop of Rome would be seen as the first among equals within the greater church at large, globally speaking. But he would be seen as such in terms of appeal when there are disputes that cannot be resolved amongst more immediate contacts. So in terms of Star Wars, and especially now with the stuff going on with Marvels, someone's got to step up, or some people have got to step up and kind of take the reins of the franchises. However that has to happen, to kind of, fight towards a degree of unity about something. And this isn't to play apologetics, and as I've said in other videos, there are a lot of other contributors on YouTube that play that game. I don't. I have enough of my own demons to fight personally, and if there's a sincere desire, I'll be the judge of the sincerity. I hate to say it, but I've lived long enough and I've come across enough to know, don't know if I want to play that game. So that aside, with this announcement, it comes with a lot of investigation. It takes years. Now, in terms of Star Wars, I would be entertainingly how would I put it? Entertainingly intrigued how this would be carried out. Now, would I want it old school, where it would be like, like what they do at theaters, or some theaters, not every theater, but like one of those screening type, survey type kind of thing, where there would be a mass engagement of people who are professed, to whatever level, to whatever degree, fans of, for example, Star Wars. And we would hash it out. And we would hear arguments. We would hear points. We would hear perspectives. And it would be a messy bit. And in terms of adaptations, like I said, there is likely going to be a necessity to adapt or kind of strip away certain elements when it comes to how the church handles councils, because in history there have been anathemas, excommunications. Speaking of excommunication, I just thought about the John Wick phenomenon of excommunicado, where you're kind of out of that circle of trust. Now, I don't know if fandoms or intellectual properties and fights over them. I don't know if they have to go to that level. I might have a chuckle where, while I'm chopping my popcorn and there might be a bowl of excommunication on against whatever party. I don't know. But all I'm saying is the what the church should have going for it, because I don't know, I can't say for sure whether the conciliar process is that shielded. But I would say when you bring in the minds together and you're trying to come to a unified voice, and that's a tough thing to do, and especially in this age of social media, how immediately people take things very personally. I just think about, if there's one thing people can learn from church governance, it's coming together, hashing out things, because every person who loves a franchise, or up to now even have that level of apathy where they're kind of throwing their hands up and they're moving on to other things, there has to be that fight. There has to, it's tricky. We talk about the internet making us so much closer or more closely connected, especially during times of the pandemic. But at the same time, I remember even 10 years ago when I was helping out at a local parish when I used to live in Sherwood, or even when I was living where I am now, kids on their cell phones. But are we willing to have that conversation, as muddy and messy that may end up being? And yeah, there will be hurt feelings. We can't hide that, because I'd rather have people who are passionate about it, because as the folks at Echo Base Network talk about, it's not like we want to poo-poo on every release. It's just, especially when it comes to having witnessed greatness, and then you're seeing a turn towards mediocrity and almost an embracing of mediocrity in order to meet certain milestones. It's not bad to have milestones, but at the same time, is it the right milestone? So that's something that any community, especially when it comes to something which shouldn't be as divisive as pop culture has been, as divisive as that has been, it shouldn't be. But it's almost like we're compartmentalizing sectors within the greater fandom. And yeah, there may be somewhere we can say, well, that opinion sucks. Well, one of the things to keep in mind is, yeah, we may think that opinion sucks, but we need to be able to charitably articulate why. Why I think that's rubbish, or and I would think that not just for the greater fandom, but it's almost a way of keeping the owners honest in terms of what they put out there. Because what I've witnessed lately with what has been proposed in the next couple of years is just resting on the name and not living up to it. Just using the name to make a quick buck because they're afraid of doing something totally new, totally fresh. As much as I love what I had grown up with, X-Men, Spider-Man, and all that, and I may have a limited degree of exposure with respect to those properties, Star Wars, X-Men, Spider-Man, Batman, Superman. I may not have the level of degree of others, but I would like to say I can only lend my 2 cents. But hopefully my 2 cents sparks the conversation towards a way of unity, not a way of division, and not a way of where we get into this degree of apathy where it's unhealthy. And that's why I would someday want to have that council, if there were ever to be one, for something like a Star Wars, or fill in the blank of your favorite property, because everyone's going to be grafted on some level to that property. I'm a different Bruce Lee fan than a lot of folks. My fandom has been a little bit more measured because of what I've been exposed to over my lifetime than the next person. But we all have something to offer in terms of perspectives that could help hone in of what would be important or what would not be important in discussing what makes Bruce Lee whatever, as a person, as an actor, as a practitioner of martial arts, a practitioner of life, and so on. But going back to Star Wars, that conciliar approach would be something I would look forward to. So, through the prayers of the now canonized, or at least officially accepted Matushka Olga, through her intercessions, may we get to that point. Maybe not in my direct lifetime, but in the lifetimes to come. So, real quickly, I know I've touched on that earlier as far as the event of the Declaration of Matushka Olga. Let's see if we can... And just a real quick bit about Matushka Olga as I understand it. She was a Matushka in the Muscovite Rus nomenclature, and I think the Kievan Rus, they might use Pani Marushka. But it's typically used for the wife of a presbyter, or what we might term priest. So in the Eastern Christian churches especially, they've retained the tradition of married clergy up to the point of presbyter. Bishop, they had that up to a point and they stopped that. And contrary to popular belief, the Western Church, mainly the Roman Catholic is historically a derogatory term, but historically the bishops of Rome, the churches of Rome, are tied to the Church of Rome. They had married clergy too. They had married presbyters and they had married bishops. But that aside, this woman, based on the accounts I've heard from people who have engaged, the locals knew her, but Matushka Olga is actually an Alaskan woman, a native Alaskan, and we've heard stories of her piety, even amongst her children. So that's who she is. And I would imagine if you were to Google that person, Matushka Olga, you may be able to find snippets of her life and the accounts of her piety during her lifetime. And this isn't to say that she might have some flaws, and I remember the hubbub over Mother Teresa. These are human beings. But however imperfect they may be or may have been, the church or whoever decides it, the Roman Church has her own way of doing it, and the Eastern churches have their own way of declaring or canonizing folks as saints, recognized by the church at large. But even amid the flaws, whatever those flaws happen to be, whatever imperfections those happen to be, the church at large in her wisdom will see something where that light of that person's life will shine forth. It's just like us, we hold up certain characters in high regard, like Star Wars. We love Luke, not the sequel trilogy Luke, but you know what I mean. We may overlook imperfections in his character in terms of the 3 original trilogy movies, but we see what was trying to be impressed upon throughout those films. We see his character development. We see his humility. And we see the maturity that had gained since Return of the Jedi. And I got to get back to reading Heir to the Empire, because we see a side of him that unfortunately the sequel trilogy had kind of botched. I'm still asking for those Leia twins, if there were ever to be a story. So, quick aside, appreciate the time, fellow skeptics. And I will say more about other retrospective things that I have done in the last week and a half or two. I'm still slogging through that whole Taylor Swift thing. I've done more Kylie Minogue listening just because I've already been hooked on some of her older tracks. So, hate to say it, Kylie is kind of winning without me looking, because I've listened to some of the Taylor Swift tracks. I'm not a Swiftie. I don't pretend to be. I'm going to put on my inner Simon Cowell, just looking at things utterly objectively and taking it from there. Again, I'm not going to put them, it's going to be easy to do this, or easily perceived to be done in such a way. I don't want them to be taken as adversarial or anything like that, but I gotta do my homework. So apologies if you guys have been waiting for that, but until next video, fellow skeptics, peace out, and I'll catch you all on the other side.